Chapter 1. A Knock on the Airlock. The outpost was quiet, the kind of stillness that hummed like a ghost through the steel bones of the station. Daniel Reese sat slouched in the workshop bay, the low thrum of the reactor core vibrating through the floor plates beneath his boots. The only light came from a half-dead console flickering pale green, casting long shadows against the racks of tools and spare conduit piping. He liked the silence. Silence didn't ask questions. Then the knock came. It wasn't really a knock, more like a faint, rhythmic chime against the outer airlock, echoing in metallic pulses. Daniel frowned, setting down the hydrospanner in his hand. No ships had docked in days, and the orbital's registry showed nothing on approach. He ran a quick diagnostic across the screen. Nothing, just static as though something or someone was overriding the signal. "Damn it," he muttered. "Not tonight." Still, his body moved on instinct. He keyed in the sequence, and the outer cameras flared to life. The image that filled the screen wasn't one he'd expected. A tall, lithe figure cloaked in torn fabric, pressed against a hatch, her skin marked with glowing lines that pulsed faintly in the cold starlight. Two smaller shapes clung to her legs. Children, Daniel realized, their eyes luminous in the dark. The comm crackled. A voice slipped through, hoarse and edged with desperation. "Human, open, please. Shelter. Be the father my children have lost." Daniel blinked, the words hanging heavy in the stale air of the bay. It wasn't just the accent, harsh, consonants bent around alien vowels. It was the plea. He could hear it in her breath, the weight behind each syllable. He hesitated, fingers hovering above the release panel. Bringing strangers aboard could mean trouble. Bringing fugitives, that could mean death. Another chime against the airlock, weaker this time. One of the children whimpered, a high, musical sound that set Daniel's teeth on edge. Something primal stirred in him, the part that remembered huddling as a boy on a storm-ravaged Earth colony, waiting for someone, anyone, to open the door. He swore under his breath and slammed the override. The outer hatch cycled, depressurization hissing like a serpent. A gust of icy air rushed in as the inner door slid open. She stumbled inside. The woman was taller than him, her skin a pale opalescent sheen, patterned with glowing tattoos that spiraled across her arms and neck. Her children clung to her, their small forms trembling. The air carried a strange scent, something like crushed silver leaves and ozone. Daniel caught himself staring, before clearing his throat. "You picked the wrong place," he said gruffly. "This station isn't a sanctuary." Her gaze fixed on him, eyes the color of burning cobalt. "Humans are sanctuary. I have heard it. You fight for family. For young, even when it is not your own." She pressed a hand over her chest, with a glow of her markings dimmed with exhaustion. "Be the father they have lost." The children's eyes met his then, wide and unblinking. They didn't understand his words, but they understood the moment. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He wasn't anyone's father. He was just a mechanic, hiding from the galaxy. And yet, he found his hand reaching out, steadying the smallest child as they wobbled against the deck. The boy's skin was warm, softer than it looked, trembling with cold. Daniel exhaled slowly. The hum of the station filled the silence between them. "Fine," he muttered, moored himself into them. "But just for tonight." The woman's shoulders sagged, relief flooding her strange features. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled silently on, indifferent witnesses to a bargain that would change all of their lives. Chapter 2. The Price of Protection. The station's recycled air always carried a faint tang of rust and oil, but now Daniel swore he could smell fear. It clung to the alien woman and her children as they huddled in the corner of his cramped quarters. The hum of the station's life support pump seemed louder than usual, a constant reminder that every decision here carried weight. Oxygen, power, survival. Daniel sat across from them on a battered crate, arms crossed, watching her. The children were curled beneath a thermal blanket he'd dug from storage, their luminous eyes blinking slowly in exhaustion. The woman, however, remained upright, spine rigid despite the weariness etched into every movement. Her markings, those strange bioluminescent tattoos, pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat trying not to fade. "You've got 3 breaths," Daniel said finally, his voice flat. "Who are you, and why the hell did you come to me?" Her head lifted, cobalt eyes fixing on him with an intensity that made his stomach knot. "My name is Lyra," she said, her words thick with an accent, but clear enough. "My mate was executed, accused of betraying the Dominion. His blood is dishonored. His children," she glanced toward the blanket where their small shapes shifted uneasily, "are marked as traitors too." Daniel swore softly. He'd heard the stories about the THRYN Dominion, a regime that prized loyalty above life, that erased entire bloodlines for a single disobedience. "So you ran," he said, "and now you're hunted." She nodded once, slow and deliberate. "The Dominion has placed a bounty. Hunters already follow. I need protection. And humans," she hesitated, searching for words. "Humans are said to guard even those who are not theirs. You take burdens. You fight when logic says surrender. You—" "Stop," Daniel cut in, shaking his head. "You've been listening to old spacer tales. I'm not that guy. I'm a mechanic. I fix conduits, patch leaks, make sure this heat doesn't blow. I'm not a soldier anymore, and I sure as hell am not your savior." Lyra leaned forward, her voice dropping low, almost a growl. "You may hide in rust and shadows, but your kind is known. I came because humans do not abandon children. Tell me I am wrong." Daniel opened his mouth, ready to argue, but the words caught in his throat. His gaze flicked toward the blanket, where the smaller of the 2 children stirred and let out a soft whimper in its sleep. His gut twisted. Memories flickered. Dust storms on an abandoned Earth colony. His mother's hand pulling him through debris, the faces of those left behind. He rubbed a hand across his face, cursing under his breath. "You don't know what you're asking. If I take you in, I'm a target. Hunters, soldiers, maybe even a Dominion cruiser breathing down my neck." "Then we share the danger," Lyra said simply. "It is already ours. Let it be yours too." The silence that followed pressed heavy between them. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and bright, an endless ocean of indifference. Daniel stared at them, searching for an excuse, a reason to shove her out the airlock and wash his hands of it. None came. Instead, he found himself saying, "You can stay for now, but if trouble comes." Her gaze softened, the faintest shimmer of relief breaking through her iron composure. "Trouble will come," she said quietly. "It always does." The words hung in the air as Daniel leaned back, already regretting the choice. He didn't know it yet, but his life had just shifted on its axis, pulled into an orbit he couldn't escape. And in the distance, beyond the glow of the station, something darker stirred, shadows moving where no starlight should be. Chapter 3. The Hunter's Shadow. The outpost markets were never quiet for long. Neon sigils and alien scripts glowed above narrow stalls. Hawkers shouted in half a dozen tongues, and the scent of fried kelp and ozone hung heavy in the air. Daniel wove through the crowd with his hood pulled low, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. Behind him, in the tangle of steel walkways and glowing signs, shadows seemed to follow. He had left Lyra and the children locked in his quarters with a strict order not to open the door for anyone. It wasn't safe out here, not for them, not for him. But life support conduits didn't repair themselves. and if he didn't fetch the parts, their section of the station would suffocate in 12 hours. Survival didn't care about timing. As he passed a food stall, Daniel noticed a sudden hush ripple through the market. Voices dropped. A trader pulled his awning closed with shaking hands. Even the neon seemed to dim. Then he saw them. 3 figures stood at the far end of the causeway, armor polished obsidian black, helmets shaped like the angular skulls of carrion birds, and rifles slung casually across their shoulders. THRYNN Dominion hunters. Their movements were fluid, deliberate, predators walking among prey. Daniel's gut tightened. He kept moving, forcing himself into the crowd. But one of the hunters raised a hand to halt a vendor. A hologram shimmered above his gauntlet. Lyra's face, pale and proud, framed by the Dominion's execution seal. Beside her, the 2 children, their glowing eyes dimmed in fear. The bounty lit the market in harsh crimson, a reward large enough to bankrupt 10 stations. Daniel cursed under his breath and ducked into a maintenance corridor. The hum of generators replaced the market noise, but footsteps echoed behind him, too quick, too precise to be chance. He moved faster, boots clanging against the grated floor. The corridor bent into a narrow choke point, a dead end if he wasn't careful. He stopped by a junction box, yanked the panel open, and pulled free a thick bundle of power conduits. Sparks danced in the dark. The hunter's boots grew louder, closing in. He could almost hear the rasp of their respirators. Human, a voice called, filtered and metallic. You carry something that does not belong to you. Surrender the traitor's brood, and we may let you crawl away alive. Daniel's jaw clenched. He remembered their whispers about humans, reckless, stubborn, too protective of what wasn't theirs. Maybe they were right. He jammed the conduits back into the panel in the wrong order. The corridor lights flared, then plunged into darkness. An alarm shrieked as magnetic seals failed, and the artificial gravity in the corridor sputtered out. Weight vanished. Daniel shoved off the wall just as the hunters rounded the corner. Their rifles swung up, plasma cores humming. In the zero-G chaos, Daniel grabbed a loose pipe and launched it like a spear. It struck the lead hunter square in the chest, spinning him backward into his comrade. A wild shot lanced overhead, melting a section of wall into bubbling slag. Daniel twisted, grabbing a handhold, and slammed his fist against the emergency vent release. Atmosphere roared out of the corridor, a hurricane pulling the hunters off their feet. They clawed for purchase, armored fingers scraping steel, but Daniel's smaller frame let him wedge into a corner bracket. The hunters tumbled into the partial vacuum, colliding hard with the bulkhead. Their rifles spun away into the void between stars before the emergency shutters slammed down, cutting off the vacuum with a final hiss. The lights flickered back, painting the corridor in blood-red emergency glow. Daniel floated for a moment, chest heaving, before gravity reasserted itself with a painful thud. He hit the deck on his knees, gasping. Not a soldier, he reminded himself. Not anymore. And yet he was still alive. The hunters weren't. He pushed himself upright, dragging a hand across his sweat-dammed brow. In the distance, he could already hear the sound of more boots. More hunters would come. The Dominion never stopped at 3. Daniel forced his legs to move. He had to get back to Lyra and the kids. Whatever stories the galaxy told about humans being too stubborn to quit, tonight he had just proven them true. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt the weight of something heavier than fear pressing on him. Responsibility. Chapter 5, The Human Gambit. The station groaned under the Dominion's grip. Docking clamps locked with sound like thunder rolling through steel, and the whole outpost shivered as if caught in the jaws of a predator. Emergency lights strode crimson down the maintenance corridors, and the steady hum of the reactor now seemed like a heartbeat racing toward panic. Daniel sprinted along the narrow causeways, toolkit banging against his hip, mind racing faster than his boots. He knew he couldn't fight soldiers trained since birth, armored in black carapace, wielding rifles that could burn through steel. He didn't need to. He just had to fight them on his terms, on human terms. He ducked into a junction room, sweat slicking his brow. The pipes hissed with vapor, glowing faintly from plasma surging through them. His fingers moved fast, yanking panels, crossing wires, rerouting power. Sparks cascaded over him like artificial lightning. The comm crackled. A metallic voice rolled through the halls, amplified by the warship outside. Station denizens, you harbor traders of the Dominion, surrender them, and we will spare your lives. Resist, and you will be erased. Daniel bared his teeth, muttering to himself. Yeah, I've heard that one before. He triggered his first trap. Half the docking ring plunged into sudden blackout. Hunters in their glossy armor stumbled as emergency grav systems flickered, sending them drifting mid-step. From the vents, superheated plasma hissed in controlled bursts, scalding their armor and forcing them to scramble for cover. One screamed, a guttural, alien cry, before silence took him. Daniel pushed on, crawling through a maintenance shaft no wider than his shoulders. The clang of Dominion boots echoed closer. With each second, he paused, pulled a small detonator from his belt, and pressed it against a coolant pipe. The line exploded with a shriek of rupturing steel, flooding the corridor below with freezing mist. The hunters slipped, armor clattering as they crashed into one another, rifles sparking uselessly in the condensation. He dropped down behind them, wrench in hand. One turn, too slow. Daniel swung hard, the heavy tool connecting with the hunter's respirator. The alien went down, stunned. The others tried to recover, but Daniel vanished back into the ductwork, already gone, already setting the next trap. Humans. He heard one of them spit in their language. Vermin. Daniel almost laughed. Damn right. By the time he reached the reactor's access hall, his lungs burned and his arms shook with exhaustion. He sealed the bulkhead behind him, punching in manual overrides. The Dominion soldiers would break through eventually, but they wouldn't like what waited. He climbed the ladder to the upper walkway, hands trembling, and looked down over the glowing heart of the outpost. The reactor pulsed with light, flooding the chamber in an eerie blue glow. Beneath it, he had rerouted fuel lines, jury-rig vents, and primed the plasma injectors to overload on a signal. It wasn't a weapon. Not really. But it didn't need to be. It was a bluff written in fire and pressure gauges. The bulkhead shuddered as the Dominion pounded against it. Daniel grabbed the comm line, voice hoarse but steady. Listen close, he growled. You take one more step in here, and this whole station goes up in a ball of plasma bright enough to cook your warship in orbit. You think I'm bluffing? Try me. Humans invented bluffing. For a long, agonizing moment, only silence answered. Then the pounding stopped. Through the viewport above, Daniel saw the Dominion cruiser's engines flare, pulling back from its dock. It lingered like a predator circling prey, unwilling to admit it had been wounded, but unwilling to bleed further. Slowly, finally, it withdrew into the stars. Daniel slumped against the railing, body shaking, his breath fog in the chilled air. He had bought time, nothing more. But sometimes, time was the difference between death and survival. The comm hissed again, Lyra's voice, trembling but alive. You are safe. Daniel swallowed hard, staring at the reactor's glow. Safe's a strong word, but we're still here. And that, he thought bitterly, was all humanity had ever needed to win. Chapter 6. The Father They Chose. The station smelled of scorched metal and ozone. Smoke curled lazily through the corridors, drifting from blown conduits and sparking junctions. Panels flickered fitfully, casting patches of light and shadow across the battered outpost. Daniel walked slowly through the wreckage, boots crunching over shattered glass and debris. His muscles ached, his knuckles were split and raw, but he was alive. Against all odds, they were all alive. When he reached his quarters, the door slid open with a reluctant groan. Inside, Lyra stood waiting, her tattoos glowing faintly in the dim light. The children rushed forward before Daniel could say a word, colliding with his legs, clinging to him with ferocity that nearly buckled his knees. The smallest one buried his face against Daniel's chest, and for the first time in what felt like years, Daniel let himself drop to the floor and wrapped them both in his arms. "I told you to stay hidden," he said softly, his voice thick with exhaustion. The boy's collar sputtered, translating in halting tones. "You came back." Daniel's throat closed. He swallowed hard and looked up at Lyra. Her gaze met his steadily. Though her shoulders trembled with the release of fear she had held tight for hours, she stepped closer, crouched down so her eyes were level with his. "They look to you now," she whispered, "not as the stranger who opened an airlock, not as a human who set traps and fought hunters. They see the father who did not abandon them." Daniel shook his head, tired laugh escaping him. "I'm not their father, Lyra. I don't even know how to—" She cut him off, voice firm but warm. "You do not need to know. You chose them. That is enough." Her words struck deeper than he expected. On Earth, family had been something the galaxy stole from him piece by piece. Now, in this place of rust and neon shadows, he had been handed something new, fragile, unasked for, but real. The children tightened their grip around him, as though afraid he might disappear if they let go. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled silently, cold and eternal. Yet for the first time, Daniel didn't see them as an empty void. He saw a possibility. He rose slowly, the children clinging to his hands, and turned toward the console. The station systems were limping, patched by his desperate sabotage. They couldn't stay here, not with the Dominion licking its wounds and certain to return. He glanced at Lyra. "If we're going to survive, we need to move. There are systems out there where the Dominion's reach isn't so strong. It won't be easy." Lyra's expression softened, and for the first time, a true smile curved her lips. "Easy is for those who have nothing worth fighting for." Daniel exhaled, a tired smile tugging at his own mouth. He looked down at the children, their glowing eyes fixed on him with a trust he hadn't earned but couldn't bear to betray. "Then I guess we're a family now," he said quietly. The hum of the station's engines rose as the outpost adjusted its orbit, the faint vibrations thrumming through the deck like the heartbeat of something newly alive. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt that same beat inside himself. Steady, stubborn human. They had chosen him, and he had chosen them. The Starship drifted free of the battered outpost, its engines thrumming like a heartbeat against the silence of the void. Beyond the viewport stretched an alien sky, constellations burning in colors no earthborn child had ever named. Nebulae shimmered violet and gold, their light spilling across Lyra's face as she stood beside Daniel, her children pressed close to her sides. The Dominion warship was gone, humiliated but unwilling to admit defeat. For now, the stars were theirs. Daniel rested one hand on the console, the other tightening around the boy's small fingers. "I thought I'd left all this behind," he murmured. "Wars, choices, family." He looked at Lyra, the words catching his throat before finally spilling free. "But I was wrong. Maybe I was just waiting for you." Her cobalt eyes glistened in the glow of the nebula. Slowly, she reached for his hand, her markings pulsing in quiet rhythm. "You were never waiting," she whispered. "You were becoming what we needed, what they needed." The children leaned against him, no longer trembling, their trust as fierce as the stars themselves. Daniel exhaled, a quiet laugh breaking into something deeper. Guess humans really are too stubborn to quit. Lyra smiled, the nebula's light dancing in her eyes. No, humans love too fiercely to let go. Outside, the stars wheeled endlessly on. Inside, for the first time, Daniel felt at home.